episode of Enjoying Your Blended Family, where we usually bring some sort of like hot topics here in blended families. And today we're doing a little bit different of a twist. I have an interview style. I have a special guest here, Susan.
Hi.
She is our unofficially adopted child, and we're going to go into some more details with that here in just a second. But just know this isn't your typical like stepchild, biological child.
Nope.
We brought Susan into our lives when she was 18 years old. But even then, where you think, well, she was practically an adult, it had a lot of good things, bad things, negative hardships, but positive in the end. So stay with us right after this. All right, okay, welcome back, guys. Now, Susan, you just want to tell them like who you are?
Sure. Who am I?
She's still trying to figure that one out.
Yeah.
Herself.
Yeah, that's very true. I am Susan. I came into the family when I was 18. I started moving around from family to family is kind of when I turned 16. A lot of things happened with my biological family that caused a lot of things to catalyst. And so I ended up living with my friends and living with people from church, and then eventually I moved in with Scarlett and Randall.
Yes, and Susan, she was one of our youth students starting out, since you're about, 16?
No, I would say long before then, because I started hanging out with Andrea and going to church with her since, 8th grade.
Okay, so that's probably
That's probably 13, 14.
13, 14. Yeah. So she knew us and we knew her. She was coming to church with her friends, but we didn't have a real in-depth relationship. And so just to give you just a little bit of how she entered into our world, we hadn't seen you in forever in youth at that point. She'd kind of disappeared. I'd actually been following her on Instagram, and so seen a little bit of her soul searching, trying to find herself during this time period. I do remember you showing up one time and Andrea were going through a hard time. I think you were living with her.
Yeah. I was living with Andrea at the time. It was when I first started living with her when I was about 16. And then I would think Andrea was so sweet. She was like, you have to talk to Scarlett. She's going to be the only one that can get you through this. She's so knowledgeable. Cool. She's like, you just got to talk to her. So we did, and she hunted you down. And then you just knew all the resources in place. And we talked for a little bit, but then, it was at the end of church. So, we all kind of dissipated. And then I kept going for a little bit. And then when I moved out of Andrea and Jan's is when I started not going to church anymore and just kind of fell apart. I fell apart. I didn't know who I was. I think when you're, in high school, you're always trying to find yourself. And then on top of that, you don't really know, whose you are, and you don't know where you belong. Even when you go home, I think is the most challenging part, and that caused a lot of identity issues within myself. I didn't fit in at school. I didn't fit in at home. Where was I ever going to fit in?
Yeah, I think it's such a hard time in general. If you had the best of situations, your biological mom and dad in your home, raising you, trying to give you the best life possible, going through those teenage years, we have found is just extremely hard on the identity and trying to figure out who you are, the things that you go through at school, trying to find your friendship group and boyfriend, girlfriend, all of that stuff. So I remember during that time, just watching your social media and saying oh, okay, she's, trying to figure herself out.
Yeah.
So then during our family at that exact same time that she was going through that is when our oldest, Riley, had went to go live with her mom. We had just bought this house that we had been praying for so that would fit all of our family in. And then when we finally got to that point, our oldest moved out. And so now we had this empty room that we really sat on for a long time. We made it my daughter's room, and she never even really came but once. So eventually I just started praying and asking God, like, help us to like move forward and still live during this season, because we were in a period where we had no connection with Randall's biological daughter during the season. So I just began to pray out, and just some scripture. I just remember something in the Old Testament just like really spoke to me about, it was like Abraham, I think, and about using the resources you have to help other people. So that day at church, I was like, God, if something comes up, I want to be the type of person that says yes. And within like 24 hours, I get this message from Susan. I think it was like Facebook Messenger or something. Yeah. And she messages me and she says, hey, I'm just looking for a family, like someone to come home to. I'm fixing to go off to college, to come home for the holidays. Do you know anybody in the church that could help me, that, you know, would be that for me? And so, I mean, when it hit me, I was just like, okay, God, I hear you loud and clear. Like, it was really like within 24 hours. And so I showed the message to Randall. I began to talk to him about it. What did he think? Susan and I met up. We had coffee. And
only the best coffee ever, though.
It was there. That place is now shut down. R.I.P. What was it called?
It was called Sunny Hearts in Ingleton.
Sunny Hearts. It was like a little coffee shop, and it was really good.
It was really good.
So we had coffee, and we talked, and just really just hearing her heart and then my heart in the process. And we're like, okay, Yana, this sounds like something that we would be able to do. Like, we can help you out. Then we had her come over and like meet Devin and Riley, because they were still in the house at the time. And Devin and Riley are just like super at this point in their life, because they were
still really young.
They were young.
Riley was still in her dance groups and things like that. Like, she was still like in like very young.
Yeah, they hadn't hit, I wouldn't think they had hit like adolescence yet, right?
Devin was kind of like maybe getting there, but
because what is y'all's age difference? Devin's turning 22 this year.
I'm 24.
So he was a couple years. So he was in high school.
Yeah.
But Devin just like super chill.
Yeah, he was super chill. He was like reading a comic book. Like, while I'm over there, like, we're having this like in-depth conversation, just nonchalant.
Yeah, they both were like go with the flow type kids. So when we brought Susan over, and then after she left, I think I took you home because you weren't driving then.
Yeah.
And then I came back and we're like, what do you think? And it's kind of like this like weird like new relationship, like blind dating. And they're like, yeah, sounds fine. You know, cool. Yeah, let's do this. And they were all on board. No problems at all. And then we decided to go, like, at the time she was living in like a home that another church provided, that her school had hooked her up with, right? It was more like a temporary housing, though, while you were trying to figure out what was your long-term goal. And she was going into the spring semester of her senior year, and was in the middle of applying for these colleges. Susan's like was top of her class. What number did you graduate?
I don't remember, because you keep telling me 14.
Yeah, something like
that.
No,
that's not right.
It's not right?
No, I don't know. I think it was like 20 something. I don't know. It was like number 20. I don't know. Something like that. I'm so sorry, anyone from Ingleton, if I stole your number. We just don't remember.
I'm pretty sure no kids your age are listening to our podcast.
Right.
You don't even listen to our podcast.
To be fair, it's because I'm not ready. I will get there. I'm just not ready.
Okay. So anyway, she was at the top, we'll just say that, like to the point where she was getting academic scholarships and had the opportunity to go to pretty much your college.
I was like, Texas is like the one school where like if you're in the top 10%, like you get automatic acceptance into any state school. And so I got into all of the schools that I wanted to get into, and I was at that point being offered scholarships for certain places. So
I tell you that because if you've raised a senior in high school, the senior year stuff is a lot. It doesn't suck. For a mom especially, it's like, you know, you want to embrace all of it. You want to make it memorable. Yeah. It's a lot. Like, they have all of it. And she was in choir, and then scholarship stuff and project graduate, like, is it called project graduate? Yeah. Just so many things. And then all these college visits on top of that. So not only did she just enter into our family, we had a cram-packed schedule. So it really began to pull our attention to like what Susan needed to be able, and she wasn't driving at the time, and so it was like trying to get her in, everywhere she needed to be at the right time, and just to still be able to enjoy that, to give her that experience. We had never experienced that yet because we hadn't had a kid that had been a senior yet. So just to paint the picture to you, the kind of like season that we all jumped into.
Yeah, we jumped in pretty head first.
Yeah, strong.
Head first.
And so let me ask you this. What were you, because I've sort of painted the picture, what were you searching for in that time? Like, I know you said family. Like, what were you really hoping for?
I mean, I really did I was at that point where, I didn't want to just keep moving from home to home. Like, I really wanted stability. And I wanted something to, create a foundation on. And I think that was the point that I was also just most accepting of, like, the Christian background and all that came with, because I think I was finally at that point, like, right before I moved in with the previous family before y'all, I had the understanding that I wanted to start going back to church again. I wanted to, I felt safe in that environment. I felt comfortable in that environment. I felt like myself. And that was something that, I wanted back so badly. And I knew that, that was going to be really hard if I ever wanted to do that. And then, things take its course. And, it's not coincidence that every family that had, taken me in was a part of the church. And I think that, God was leading me to where I needed to be able to find myself.
Yeah, and I think each family that you became a part of, even if it was short-lived or not, all played like a vital role in creating just such a blessing at the time during that time. So you were looking for somewhere that was going to be your place.
Yeah.
Like that. And you think like an 18-year-old, like that's the time you're wanting to escape from your family, right? You want to go off and make a life of your own, but that wasn't really what you were searching for at that time. You were looking for something different where you were able to.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, if we look at it like, from the psychological standpoint, I grew up really, really fast, and I had to make all of these adult decisions, when I was 10, 11, 12. And, up until that point when I could finally, start making decisions for myself. And then it's kind of like, well, I never really had a functional family. And that was something that
I laugh because she was hoping for a functional family.
But, I mean, if you, because you experienced some of that in your childhood too. Yeah. And so I think that's how we connected. We both felt that, underlying, there's some dysfunction in that. And so my experience with my own family was so dysfunctional that I didn't even process until I went to college. And because of that, I think I was craving something that most little kids, teenage, preteens crave. Like, they want to be close to their family. They want, that's the center of everything. And I was just craving that at that time because I just developmentally wasn't, really there. And then at college was kind of when I started grieving all the things that had happened to me. And I ended up, my first 2 years of college were probably my hardest because I, became very depressed, and, I was working through all of these things from my past, and that I was bringing into somebody else's family. And, I felt like the cause of a lot of hardships in all of these families that I was a part of. And that, to me, it was crushing. And so I think, a little bit of therapy helps. But
yeah, we say that all the time on here.
A little bit of therapy helps,
Counseling.
But I mean, that really was what kind of pulled me out of that initial depression that was so bad that I just couldn't move forward with life at all. And so I think that's kind of, understanding that, I can stand here and say, oh yeah, that I was just so broken that I was looking for glue to put myself back together. I really wouldn't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, and the thing with that is you were bringing in your stuff, and although like my heart genuinely is to serve the Lord and do what He asks of us, and so many people when we tell them the story, they're like, "Oh my gosh, y'all are incredible! Like it's so amazing what you're doing," and I'm like, on the inside, I'm like,
the world is falling apart.
Yes, because not only was she looking for something solid, like we were so broken too, but I wanted to make good out of that. And like that's what I was searching for, was to be able to help somebody and do like, just I don't know exactly what I was searching for. I wanted to be able to give her what she was looking for, but didn't realize how we were still in the middle of our own trauma, that we weren't able to quite give her that. And not only that, like when she came in, it did disrupt the system in our home, and we didn't handle it the way that we should have, because we didn't have the tools and the resources when my kids began to like see her as a threat in the house. And what I've always seen them as so easy-go-lucky, now all of a sudden they were voicing these opinions of like, dislike, like
discord.
They didn't want it and they wanted it to change, but I'm like, I'm already committed here, like I can't just be like, you're out, kid, like sorry, you've caused the problem here. And we did like do so many things that we could have done differently afterwards, but we didn't. Now that we've gone through the whole process, like I could see like how we could have, we could have done it a lot better.
I mean, everyone could have had a different role in it, but I mean that we can't change any of that, and so there's still those things that we're trying to mend. And I think no one really knows that they're dealing with their own trauma until they're on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we were all kind of we were all going through trauma at the same time, and didn't really realize how deep we were in it. And then
and none of us were doing counseling at
no
at that time, so we really didn't have the tools that we needed to be able to function. And I mean, I hadn't like that. This whole process over the last 5 years has transformed me into the person that I am now. But before that, like I remember taking you to college and sitting in the parent orientation and them telling me they're going to call you crying. Your kid's going to want to come home. Don't dwell on the past, don't dwell on the sad stuff. Just keep their mind off of it. Talk to them about the positive. And I take like what professionals say as gold. So when she called and she's like crying, I just want to come home. I don't want to do this. I can't do this. She's like so sad. It's too hard. Blah, 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 blah. All the things that a freshman will often experience. And at the same time, like we were struggling with our kids here and with that relationship with our oldest Riley and trying to mend that. So I was really going through a season of what I can now see was some depression as well, but didn't realize it at the time. But I didn't want her to know that either. So I would just try to take her mind off of it, tell her this is normal and all of these things. It didn't allow her to really feel what she was feeling either, because and they even told you, like, don't show up in the beginning. Don't, like, show up on the weekends and all of this, because
that was hard.
It's so hard for them, and they're just going to want to go back. So give them time, give them space to really find who they are. Don't spend all these hours on the phone or calling and checking on them. Let them figure these things out. And so I'm like, okay. So I'm just listening to the dean of the school telling me what I should do.
Okay, but okay, so I went to UMHB. They're a Christian background. They're not thinking that, they're not thinking about blended family. They don't have that in their background of mind. They're not saying, oh, these have been your kids for the last 18 years. They need to get on with their life. No, it was like she was taking professional advice for a kid that had just moved in, and it's like, but why are you kicking me out already? Like, I thought we discussed this. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I think even when your kids go away to college is a whole another thing. And I know I have a lot of questions here, and I probably won't get to everything today, but I know like what you were searching for and what we were trying to give you, and like you were wanting, like you felt like you wanted to be a part of our life from the beginning. To the point like you were even calling us mom and dad.
Yeah.
And that we probably could have handled differently as far as maybe talking with everybody and having like
what they're comfortable with. Yeah.
good conversations around that instead of it being, but I know like having had you in our life all this time now, like you're looking for something just to be your home. And so it would be hard for you when we have a past of raising these children and that you weren't a part of that, and now you came in, you got to experience a little bit, and now you're gone, and now we're still living our life without you here, and you're off trying to like function yourself. But let me ask you this, okay, while you were still here during that 6 months before you went off to school, or 8 months, what was like your initial, like when you moved in? Like it can be positive, like when you first moved in.
When I first moved in, it was really good. I mean, little Riley and I had a good relationship that summer. Like we spent almost the entire summer like outside in the pool. And I look back on my Instagram and I'm like, wow, like our relationship is, nothing like that to where it was. And so, I think, that first summer we were all trying to bond and figure out our relationships and who's who to who, and what is this person to me, and how is this person going to affect my life. And I think at first it was really good, and I think once that that distance started to come in when I went to school is when everyone kind of like felt like, okay, like now how is this going to work. Where, I mean, there was very few moments that I can recall, like, Riley saying, well, she's not my sister, or, and, like, I mean, it's true, I wasn't, but, and then there was moments when, Devin had told me once that, that I was just a replacement to their older stepsister, and I was like, that's far from the truth, like, I mean, I didn't even know her. Like, how could I be a replacement to her, And so those were very few at that time. But when I had come back for my first Christmas here, that's when, like, the whole dynamic completely kind of changed. And I think that's when y'all are also dealing with a lot of other things that I was never even a part of. And so it was confusing.
Yeah, I think that fall was that really hard fall that was for our family, where everything was just changing. The kids were starting to voice wanting to go live with their dad. I know now, having spoke with Big Riley during that time when she started to see Susan like popping up on our Instagram and in our family pictures for Easter and that kind of stuff, she saw it as a replacement. Like, oh, my dad just like, I came out and he inserted another person in my place. So then she became like even more like headstrong that she was not going to come back to our home and be a part of our family. And so during that, it was a lot. It was a lot. Everybody trying to figure out their place during that time, and then people starting to vocalize like their opinions on it. And then I really felt stuck, like, and I don't function well when I feel like I can't make anybody happy. And at the time, like, it was either let Susan down and say, okay, I'm sorry this didn't work out, and I focus on my kids, or I let my kids down and I'm focused on Susan and letting her still come home, because they would, tell me like, we don't want her here. And I'm like, but she's here. Like, there's nothing I can do now. And they were just going through that same identity crisis that you went through during those teenage years, trying to figure it out. They were missing their dad and the opportunity they had to have a relationship with him. We were all mourning Big Riley, regardless that we didn't talk about it or know how to talk about it, because in our home, we really tried to function by focusing on the positive. Like, let's not dwell on the negative stuff that we can't change. So we didn't have a lot of hard conversations that I think, had we sat down and talked through things, we could have through the bottom. And I just felt like I was trying to like hold everybody's relationships up, and I couldn't. And I was being pulled in all these different ways, and no matter what I did, somebody was going to be unhappy. And so that just sort of sucks,
Yeah.
And I'm sure you were feeling the same way, just feeling like that rejection of like, this is supposed to be my home and it feels like crap.
Well, I think it was just really hard because it's like, it wasn't even that, I felt any like frustration as to like, this is my home, like, and it feels like crap so much. It was more like, oh crap, I'm never gonna fit in anywhere. Like,
Hey, we'll be back momentarily. Check out this announcement. We are so excited to be able to give you our new free guide. You see, one of the hardest parts about being in a blended family are the relationships that struggle to connect or become strained by all the changes.
You can't force someone to love someone else, but you can do little things to connect with them and show them that you care. That's why we created this 1-week guide that has quick solutions to build stronger connections with your family. It's a way that you can start small by focusing on one relationship at a time. And the good news is that you don't have to make big changes. It's the small steps that make the big impacts.
We want you to have this free guide that has 7 ways to grow your relationships in just 7 days. So quit stressing over strengthening your family relationships. Start here by downloading this free guide, Enjoying Your Blended Family, 7 Ways in 7 Days to Connect. You'll be so glad you did. The link to get your free copy is in the show notes of this episode. Now back to the episode.
anywhere. Like, it wasn't even just it wasn't, oh, I don't fit in here. It was like, oh, I'm never going to fit in anywhere. Like, I didn't fit in at college. Like, I was a brand new Christian going to a Christian college where everyone had been raised in the church, by the church, and was just developing their relationships with, you know, fellow Christians. And I was just getting started. I probably didn't know any scriptures or anything. I was just like, you know, this was a place for me to grow, and I felt so behind. And the fact that I was just really trying to figure out myself, and you know, even now I'm like, you know, I know myself, but now it's like, you know, I'm trying to figure out a career, but you know, that's another story. Yeah. But
is there a time that you recall, like, because we came to the same issues a lot in the family, is like we would come to head with an issue and your natural response was to flee, like to run. Mm-hmm. What was the time that you were like, this is, I think I have in my head that time, but what was the time you were like, okay, this isn't the family, I've got to go, like, I can't do this?
Oh man. I can't even pinpoint that moment. I think it's when, you know, little Riley's and I's relationship just kind of hit complete rock bottom. And that was like, okay, like, I'm not going to sit here and destroy people's, like, my presence is destroying people's lives. Like, I would be a terrible person to sit here and stay and just make everyone fight just because I'm, like, existing here. And that was the point when I was like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I can't. And that was when, you know, that was a turning point. I can't even remember, like, exactly what, you know, season that was. It was just, I remember mine and Riley's relationship got so bad that...
And this was Little Riley?
Little Riley, yeah. That I was like, okay, I'm not going to stick around and continue to hurt these people. Like, that's not fair to them. Like, they didn't sign up for this. Like, you know, if God really wanted me with these people, then, like, you know, it would be an easier process than this. So I feel like that's kind of when I was like, okay, I gotta go.
I just remember a lot, and again, I didn't always handle things the right way, even up until our very last, like when you moved out the last time. Yeah. I always felt so pulled in between, and like I was gonna have to let somebody down no matter what I did. I've seriously have learned so much through all of this, and I think what your and I relationship has taught me more than anything, and I'll probably start crying, but that, sorry, but that conflict is not a bad thing. And every time, like, when Susan would bring up something, she would want to, like, have these hard conversations, and I didn't have answers, and I couldn't solve it, and I couldn't fix it. I remember at Thanksgiving, like, that you were like, I just won't come home, don't come get me, or whatever, I'll just go. I don't even remember what we were fighting over, and I just remember being at school and, like, texting you back and forth and just being so mad that I needed to get all of my emotions out, and then she would text back so mad with all of her emotions, and it was like, I would come home, and then I would tell Randall all of it, but I would tell him, like, my side, obviously, you know, and then he would just, like, hear me out, and he didn't want to see me hurting, and so he would feed into that. And I hated it because I just wanted things to be easy. And I didn't know how to do conflict. At that point in my life, I didn't do conflict with Randall either. I would brush anything that bothered me, I would just either try to make it happy or brush it under. And I hadn't figured out how to move past some really uncomfortable conversations. And the thing with Susan in our lives that taught me is that every time, now you got tears coming down.
Sorry.
Every time we would get to this head and she would want to run, like God would always bring me back to like, you're the adult here. You got to man up, in a sense, like figure this out and figure out how to talk through this instead of just saying, girl, bye. Like if this isn't what you want, and I really just felt so dysfunctional. I felt like I wanted to do this thing. I wanted to be this home for her, and I brought her into our life, and now I don't have any of my kids. Like the only one that I'm able to please is the one that's not mine, and it just felt icky in a sense. Like it felt like, what kind of mom are you that you ran off every single one of your kids, and the only one that wants to be in your life is the one that's not actually yours, and now you're driving her away too. And so it was just like all of these emotions, but little by little we would have these hard conversations. And I remember one time finally having to tell her, like, you can run. And I think it was that year, that Thanksgiving, I said, you can run, you can go, and you can find a new family. But you're going to come into these exact same problems again. You're going to continue to have these exact same problems until you fight, until you stick it out, until we get through this conflict and we figure out a result. And in that, it grows your relationship. Like when you face things head on instead of completely just running from them, it creates that intimacy. And through that, it taught me how to have hard conversations with Randall and to be able to voice my hurt and my pain and what I needed from him, and him able to tell me what he needed, and us learn how to stick it out, and then to have those hard conversations with the other kids as well. Mm-hmm. You have anything to add to all of that?
No.
What would you say?
I'm like, it's a lot to follow up.
Yeah, I mean, would you say all that feels accurate?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I mean, that's a lot of what is going on. I think it's still true to this day. I think I learned a lot of, like, even with, in my own relationship, now that I felt adult enough to have a relationship. I think, my first reaction is to flee, and eventually we had to have that conversation in our own relationship, like, if this is what we want to do, we're sticking it out, and we needed to decide that, because we were at that, kind of like 5-6 month, and we're like, okay, either like, we're gonna sit here and fight about everything, or we need to stick it out and really figure out like what we want from each other.
Yeah.
And
I think when people grow up with the background that you've had or I've had, a lot of people that have that like dysfunction in a sense of just wanting and craving normal so bad. What we think in our head normal is.
Like what I consider normal is like, like the only real outside influence I had was either when I went to my friends' houses or when I would, like watching TV. Like, what's normal?
Yeah, and normal doesn't actually exist, but we crave it for so much. I think if you didn't have it, now if you lived in what society would consider normal, then you may be searching and seeking for something else outside of that. Yeah. But for us, I think that was part of it, is to find that, and then when you can't, you're just like, okay, let me run. This isn't it. Let me run. I don't fit in here, and What would you say though was like the benefit of sticking it out?
The benefit of sticking it out, I think just the fact that, we have created so many memories, and like that, I can look back on and say, there is somebody who does love me, and, I can come to if like all else fails and I'm like breaking down. Like the real benefit is being able to open up my emotions to other people too. It's just like, I was so closed off and like kept all of the hurt to myself, and then now I can finally, kind of express like, okay, like this happened, and now I can have real relationships with people, and not just these ones where I'm like, oh yeah, this is normal, like this is what people do, and I'm like, whereas now like I can be a little bit more authentic in who I am in relationships and friendships and all of that I have with other people.
What would be a piece of advice that you would give a family that's taking in? Like, I was hoping we would have a little bit more time where I could say, like, what you wish I would have done differently. But if there was a family considering taking in someone, or maybe they adopted, or, you know, there's so many different scenarios.
I would say don't compare. I think that's one of the biggest things is that I saw in almost every home that I was in, is that they want to compare their kids to you and vice versa. And I think that that immediately creates disconnect between your kids and that person that you're bringing in. And that's really where you want to have the first bonds, is because if your kids are happy and they're happy with your kids, like there's not gonna be a whole lot of butting heads. But I think that was probably the biggest one, is that you know, I moved in with my best friend Andrea and her mom, and you know, the first thing Andrea would say would, you know, coming from that, she's like, oh yeah, my mom talked about you all the time and how, you know, you got straight A's and blah 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 blah, and tried to compare you to me. And you know, I'm like, and then that was really hurtful to our relationship as best friends. And, you know, I'm so glad that on the other side of that, you know, Andrea and I'm going to be in her wedding, but because we were able to, you know, time heals things too, but I think we were able to, you know, have that understanding that that's not what the intention was. And so I think that's kind of my biggest, is don't compare. You know, every kid, you have to understand every kid is going to be different. And I think, you know, you know that with your own kids, like, oh, you know, Devin is very quiet and keep to himself, and Riley's very outgoing and outspoken. And then, you know, Big Riley's very energetic and musically talented and things like that. And so, and then, you know, but every kid is individual. And so you can't sit there and be like, oh, well, Susan cleans her room more than...
When I think too,
and I'm
like
yeah, that's not fair. Like,
when someone comes in, like you came in and you are wanting to find your place in the house, so you're wanting to please, because hello, you don't want to be like kicked out, and so you're actually listening to our instructions and doing what we ask you to do.
But that also is my personality too. Like, I'm very rule follower and accept on certain things.
And with the kid, our other kid, our biological kids, are like not listening to us, because that's completely normal. Like, you have to tell them to do something 15 times and, you know, contribute, be a part of the family, like help out and all these different things. And it's very normal, especially during those teenage years, for them to start pushing against that. And so I did in the beginning of like, well, why don't you do this? Like, Susan doesn't even, you know, like, I'm not even her actual mom, and she does what I tell her to, but you don't do the thing that I tell you to.
Those are the little seeds that you plant in their head that, like, not like you specifically, that gets planted in their kid's head, that, you know, oh, well, they're not my sibling, or they're not part of this family, like, you're not her mom, so why should I be compared to that person, or, you know, things like that. And I think that is the biggest downfall, I think, to what can happen if you bring somebody into your family.
Well, you probably have to give the right answer here, or what I would consider the right answer. Are you glad that after all of these years that it wasn't a different family that I suggested you go live with? I would think that a lot. Like, I should have told her, like, about this old rich couple that, like, those are the thoughts that would come in my head. Like, I should have told her that. It would have been so much easier on everybody. She would have been able to have everything she needed, because we were struggling financially too. Like, it wasn't easy for us to take in someone else, and then you don't think of all the costs and stuff when you already are struggling financially, which she, luckily, because of, like, assistance with government, like, people thought we were paying for her college. Like, these are what family members were telling us. Like, you're paying for your own kid to go to college, and you don't take your kids to go get new school clothes. And I'm like, I do not pay for her college.
The only thing that paid for my college was my brain, so you can step off.
Like they had all of these people create all of these stories of what they thought was happening. Like she had assistance from the government from being considered like a homeless child. I don't know exactly what you call it.
A scholarship. I mean, I had a scholarship.
We had scholarships and like just other assistance that came into play. We would help her like try to pave the path, and even some of that, like, you know, we didn't give her the most sound advice because we were trying to give her what she wanted and not, you know, she wanted to go to college and she wanted to go to a university, and we've never experienced that before, and so, you know,
I wanted out of Butte County, and look where I end up at. It's fine.
But she ended up accruing a lot of debt in the process, and then I think there was a little resentment on us for not telling you differently, but she had just been accepted into all of these universities, right?
It was a lot. It was a lot.
You should go to BC. That's the wisest decision to make.
I mean, I feel like even a lot of that falls on, you know, lack of like counseling from like the schools. Like there's not a whole lot of college counseling. Like there's just
they just help you sign up for your classes.
Yeah, I mean, like they try to be like, oh, that's it. Like, I mean, I distinctly remember like my counselor being like, I don't think you should go, but like no real like reason why I shouldn't go. And so that was really hard for me because I'm like, well, I mean, like, let's look at it. Like, it wasn't like, you know, I want to see why. And like, I want a tangible reason. And like, you know, we never looked at numbers or finances and things like that.
And I didn't want to be a dream crusher. So I'm not going to be like, you shouldn't go. But then it was like she wanted to come home, and I'm like, no, you need to stay, because I thought from what the counselor, her dean at the school was like, they're going to want to try to come home. Don't let them try to come home. Well, obviously, because they wanted all that money.
Yeah.
So there was just a whole lot in that whole dynamic too that came. So just, I don't know if you're in this, I don't think a whole lot of people find themselves in this situation, but I know that God is going to use our story. Mm-hmm. He's used it with each of our kids' stories and the different things that we've gone through, as far as with our oldest and her going to live with her mom, and then me as a biological mom and my kids like running to go live with their dad, and then them coming home. Like, I know He's going to use this story too, that somebody else out there is going to be blessed by it. Some child out there is going to be blessed by it because you had a little bit more knowledge and background for that. So we'd love to hear your story.
Let me answer your question though.
Oh, did you not answer
I didn't answer your question. You went off on what you think my answer should be.
That's not normal for me.
But I was going to say, like, you know, there are situations that could have been, you know, easier, but that doesn't mean that I would have experienced the same kind of love. Because like you said, like you were going through your own things. You were, you know, you didn't have the necessary finances to bring in another person. But I think if, you know, you would have just said, oh, here's a rich couple that, you know, can take in another person. Like, I don't think I would have felt the same kind of love that, you know, like you kind of experienced love through struggles. And I think that's what that, you know, if somebody is going to sit there and go through all these struggles just for me, that's the kind of, like, that's real love. It's not just like, oh, here you go, we set you up for success, you're loved, goodbye. Like, you know what I mean? And so I think, you know, no, I wouldn't change the fact that your family was the family that I came into, but I wish I could have done more on my part, I guess, to make the transition easier. And, you know, I think, you know, I wish we would have had a little bit more of an idea of how to bring in another person, and what that entails. And so
it's not just having an empty room in your house.
No.
It goes a lot deeper. Yes. But I'm also glad that we stuck it out. And I think you're so right. And I hope that if that leaves you with anything too, is we try to avoid tragedies in life. We try to avoid the hard things. But I mean, it's like it's shown studies that when you go through, people that go through hard times, like military people that fight in a war together, they have a bond like no other because they leaned on each other and they learned and they grew and they experienced this hardship together. Same with people that go on mission trips and stuff like that. They create a bond that can't be replaced because of the hard thing that they're walking through together. So
I agree.
All right, guys. Well, I hope this was just very informative for you and spoke to your heart. And again, I would love to hear your story. If you're going through something like this, or you're considering it and you have any questions, or you have advice for other people that are going through it because you've seen the other end, like, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear your story and share your story. And until next time, bye.
Hey, thanks for joining us today for another episode of Enjoying Your Blended Family. All the links we've talked about today, they're in the show notes below. If you've enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe below. It's free and it lets you know when we have another episode for you to listen to.
And if you want to help us out, leave us a rating and review so that we can keep reaching more people. Until next time, remember to enjoy the moment.